Under the searing glare of New York City studio lights, a storm was brewing on live television, though no one could have predicted the lightning strike about to hit. It was a high-stakes U.S. political panel show, the kind that pulls in millions, nightly hungry for drama and sound bites. At the edge of the sleek glass table sat Karoline Leavitt, former Trump spokesperson, her voice a razor, her posture rigid, with calculated intensity. Opposite her was Captain Ibrahim Traore, leader of Burkina Faso, invited to discuss African sovereignty and U.S. foreign policy. This was meant to be a diplomatic exchange, a civil debate. But in an instant, it became a battlefield. Midway through the segment, as Traore calmly critiqued America's historical role in West Africa, Karoline's composure snapped. She leaned forward, her eyes flashing finger, pointed like a dagger. "Shut up, boy," she spat, her words slicing through the air like a whip. The studio fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. The host's mouth hung open, frozen in disbelief. Viewers at home gasped, their collective breath held. Social media ignited in a frenzy of shock and outrage. But Traore didn't flinch. He didn't shout or storm off. Instead, he fixed her with a gaze so deep, so unyielding it seemed to pierce through centuries of pain. And when he spoke, it wasn't what anyone expected. The silence after Karoline's insult hung heavy, haunting. She leaned back, arms crossed, a smirk flickering as if she'd landed a winning blow. But Traore didn't budge. Slowly, with the deliberate calm of a soldier who'd faced war, a man who'd buried a leader bearing the weight of a continent, he rose to his feet. Not in anger, not in defiance, but with a quiet strength that commanded the room. He walked to the edge of the stage, looking out at the audience, silent, stunned, rooted in place. "I come from a place," he began, his voice soft but resonant, "where boys are forced to become men before they learn to dream." No one blinked. "You can call me boy on your stage," he continued, turning to Karoline. "But where I come from, boys carry nations on their backs. They fight so others don't starve. They lead because no one else will." Karoline's face faltered, her smirk dissolving. Traore wasn't just defending himself, he was unearthing a truth far deeper than her jab. The cameraman zoomed in, capturing a tear glistening in the eyes of an elderly black woman in the front row. This wasn't politics anymore, it was raw, unfiltered humanity. And America was listening. The studio lights seemed to dim under the weight of the moment, as Traore's voice grew quieter, almost as if he were speaking not to Karoline, but to every soul watching. "I buried my father under an open sky," he said, his words a somber hymn. "There were no cameras, no speeches, just dirt, silence, and the sound of my mother's grief." The audience sat frozen, some holding their breath. "He was killed during a coup funded by outside powers." Traore added, his gaze brushing Karoline, whose eyes now darted nervously. "So when you say, 'Sit down, boy,' do you mean the boy who watched his village burn? The boy who studied by candlelight because the lights never came back on after colonialism left?" A U.S. veteran on the panel, decorated and stoic, quietly placed a hand over his heart. "You don't have to like me," Traore said, his voice unwavering, "but you will not erase me." A single clap echoed from the back of the studio, then another, until the room erupted. People stood not out of pity, but in reverence. Karoline, for the first time, looked diminished, swallowed by the moment. As the applause faded, Traore glanced down, choosing his next words with care, then lifted his eyes to the crowd. "You see a soldier," he said, "but I was raised by a woman who worked with her bare hands. My mother sold firewood, walked miles in worn-out sandals so I could go to school. She hid her hunger so I wouldn't feel mine." The camera cut to Karoline. Her smirk was gone. Traore's voice held steady, though his eyes glistened. "She never said sit down. She said stand up, even when it hurts." A tear rolled down the cheek of a young girl in the front row, who whispered to her father, "He sounds like you." Traore continued, "So when someone like you calls me boy, you're not insulting me. You're insulting every mother who ever carried a nation on her back." The studio fell silent again, but this time it was sacred. Even the host looked choked up. Karoline's insult had cracked open a wound, and from it, something beautiful and profound emerged. The stillness shattered with an unexpected voice. "He's right." All eyes turned to a fellow panelist, retired U.S. Army Colonel Jacob Whitmore. White-haired, respected his voice, trembling. "I served in Liberia. I've seen what boys like him face." The camera zoomed in as his hand shook slightly. "Calling him boy isn't debate, it's humiliation. What you just said dishonors every brave man and woman I served with in Africa." Karoline shifted uncomfortably, her lips pressed tight, her presence shrinking. Whitmore walked to Traore and extended his hand. "Captain, thank you. Not just for defending your people, but for reminding us what true leadership looks like." The two men shook hands, and the audience clapped again, tears and respect mingling in their eyes. Even those who'd never heard of Burkina Faso felt something raw, something true. Karoline's face flushed red, the energy of the room slipping from her grasp. Like sand. She hadn't anticipated this. She thought her words would silence him, perhaps earn her cheers. Instead, they backfired. "Oh, come on," she snapped, her voice sharp with desperation. "Are we seriously pretending he's a saint now?" The room recoiled. A few gasped. Traore turned to her calmly. "It's not about sainthood. It's about humanity." Karoline stammered, looking to the host for support. But he just stared, stunned. "What's next?" she barked. "We apologize for being Americans." A young black student in the crowd stood, her voice cracking. "No. You apologize for being cruel." It wasn't just a retort, it was a wound opening on live TV. Karoline knew she was losing. She had underestimated Traore, and now her arrogance unraveled before millions. She forced a laugh. "Oh, come on, this is America. We're allowed to disagree." But the audience didn't laugh. The camera panned across faces, some tearful, one woman clutching her chest, a man in the back wiping his eyes. Traore leaned forward softly. "Disagreement is healthy, but disrespect kills the conversation. And if you kill the conversation, you kill understanding." The applause came again, slower, deeper, like a mournful hymn. Karoline sat frozen. Her insult no longer echoed. It was buried beneath human truth. Gently, Traore reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded, creased letter, edges slightly torn. "This was written by my younger brother," he said quietly, 2 days before he was killed during a protest for food. The room held no applause, only silence. He unfolded it carefully. The host, visibly emotional, leaned forward. He wrote, "Big brother, if I die, promise me they won't forget why." Traore held the letter to the light. Some gasped. Others wept. "So no," he said, voice steady but heavy, "I won't sit down. Because I carry the memory of those forced to kneel." Karoline blinked rapidly, her hands trembling under the table. For once she had no words. Outside the studio, social media erupted. The clip went viral, shared with a single word: watch. As Traore folded the letter back into his pocket, a strange quiet blanketed the room. Even the crew stopped moving. No whispers, no typing, just held breath. The host finally spoke. "Captain Traore, is there anything you want to say to the American people watching right now?" He looked directly into the camera. "Yes, you don't need to know where Burkina Faso is to understand dignity. You just have to know what it feels like to be invisible. I've never asked for pity. I ask for eyes that see." Then something shocking happened. A camera operator set down his equipment, stepped onto the stage, shook Traore's hand and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me what honor looks like." And that was just the beginning. A middle-aged black woman in the third row stood unprompted. "I didn't come here to speak, but I need to," she said softly. "My son served in Afghanistan. He came back in a box. He was called boy, too, even in uniform." Her voice cracked as she looked at Traore, tears streaming. "When you spoke, it felt like my son stood up again." Gasps echoed. The camera zoomed in. Traore nodded, no words, just shared pain. The woman added, "America needs men like you, not loudmouths who talk over pain." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. This wasn't a debate anymore, it was a reckoning. Karoline clenched her jaw. This was supposed to be her moment, her climb. Now, she was invisible. "This is a setup," she hissed into her mic. This isn't journalism. It's emotional theater. The host turned slowly, removing his earpiece. Karoline, the cameras are rolling. You made this moment. You just didn't expect it to speak back. She slammed her cue cards down, stood, and stormed off, set heels echoing like gunshots. The audience didn't boo or cheer. They watched in silence. Someone whispered what millions thought she couldn't handle the truth. Traore, still seated, spoke quietly. I didn't come here to shame her. I came to tell the truth. The host swallowed hard. Well, the truth is, sitting in your seat, and the world kept watching. As the commercial break rolled in, producers scrambled. Phones buzzed, emails flooded. A message from the White House press team read, "We saw everything." No one knew what it meant, but everyone knew it mattered. Back on set, the host leaned in. Captain Traore, do you believe America can truly hear people like you? He looked into the camera, not with anger, but with quiet strength. Yes. But first, America has to listen when it's uncomfortable. Then, he shared a story no one expected. Last year, I visited a children's hospital in Chicago. A little girl, just 8, drew a flag with Burkina Faso's colors next to the U.S. flag. She said, "You're both fighting for us." Tears dotted the audience. That child, he whispered, understood more about unity than most grown leaders do. By the time the segment went viral, people across the nation paused dinners, in kitchens, conversations in barbershops, late nights scrolling in bedrooms. Even families unfamiliar with politics were glued to their screens. On Twitter, Jacques Sit Down Boy flipped into a movement of reflection, not in Karoline's favor. Clips, spread with captions like "My dad called me crying," said this reminded him of 1963, and I showed this to my students. Half the class couldn't stop crying. Traore remained composed, declining to comment on Karoline's walk-off. She's not my enemy, he said. She's a symptom. The real problem is deeper, and it's been growing in silence. A teenage boy watching from Atlanta tweeted, I didn't know who Traore was an hour ago. Now I want to be like him. What was meant as a takedown became a national awakening. Just before the broadcast ended, the host received a note, eyes widening. Captain Traore, we have a surprise guest on video. The screen lit up, revealing the same Chicago hospital girl, waving a red, white, and green paper flag. Hi, Captain, she beamed. You remembered me. The room melted. You said I was brave, she continued, but tonight, you were the bravest. Some wept openly. The host wiped his face, whispering off mic, My daughter's the same age. Traore's lips trembled, eyes glistening. He placed a hand over his heart. You give me strength. You are the future I fight for. The girl nodded proudly, then said, next time someone says, sit down, boy, I'll tell them, stand up like Traore. The feed ended. The audience rose. This wasn't just television, it was history. Hours later, in his Washington hotel room, Traore received a letter slid under his door from the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. It read, Dear Captain Traore, tonight, you spoke for every soul ever told to sit down, boy. We are preparing a permanent exhibition, Dignity Under Fire. We'd be honored to feature your words, your story, the moment that changed the world. He set it down, whispering, not for me. For all of them. Outside, crowds gathered, not in protest, but to say thank you. A week later, Karoline returned to the studio. No cameras, no audience, just a folded note for Traore. Delivered during a press conference, it read, I said, sit down, boy. And you stood taller than I've ever seen a man stand. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope your people and my daughter grow up in a world that learns from your strength, not my ignorance. The room fell silent. Traore looked up. We don't heal through silence. We heal through courage. And she just showed some. From that day, even his harshest critics called him the man who made America listen. Weeks passed, but in the studio, one thing remained: an empty chair. Where Traore once sat, unlabeled, unexplained, yet understood by all. It meant dignity. It meant courage. It meant one man from Burkina Faso walked into a storm and emerged a symbol of peace. Later that year at the United Nations, Traore held up a small handmade American flag drawn by that 8-year-old girl. "This was given to me by a child who believed I stood for something good. That means more than any medal." He looked into the camera. "America, don't just clap, change. If this story moved you, if you felt that lump in your throat, let me know what touched you most. And if you believe dignity, grace, and truth still matter, stay with us for stories that make you feel, stories that matter." Thank you for listening, and never sit down when it's time to stand. In the days and weeks following Captain Ibrahim Traore's seismic moment on live television, the reverberations of his words and presence refused to fade. What had begun as a contentious clash on a New York City political panel show had morphed into something far greater, a cultural touchstone, a call to conscience, and a catalyst for change that reached far beyond the studio walls. The hashtag #StandUpLikeTraore trended for weeks, not just in the U.S., but globally, as people from diverse backgrounds shared stories of resilience in the face of disrespect. Traore, a leader from a nation many Americans couldn't previously locate on a map, had become an unexpected symbol of dignity in a polarized world. Back in Burkina Faso, the impact was immediate and tangible. News of Traore's unflinching response to Karoline Leavitt's insult spread through villages and cities alike, often shared via grainy videos on second-hand phones. In Kaya, where Traore's roots ran deep, community leaders organized gatherings to watch the clip translating his words into local dialects for those who didn't speak English or French. "He spoke for us," a schoolteacher in Ouagadougou told a visiting journalist, her voice thick with pride. "He showed the world we are not invisible. Now maybe they will send more than pity, maybe they will send help." Small but meaningful aid packages began arriving, some directly linked to grassroots fundraisers inspired by Traore's story, providing school supplies, medical kits, and food to conflict-affected areas. In the U.S., the conversation Traore sparked continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Schools and universities incorporated the moment into curricula, using it as a case study in discussions about race colonialism and global responsibility. In a high school in Chicago, the same city where Traore had met the young girl who drew the dual flag, students launched a pen pal program with children in Burkina Faso, exchanging letters and drawings to build connections across continents. The girl herself, now a local celebrity of sorts, appeared on a morning talk show with her family holding up a new drawing. Traore, standing tall with the word hero scrawled above him in crayon. "He made me feel like I matter," she said shyly. "So I want kids like me over there to know they matter too." On Capitol Hill, Traore's words indirectly fueled a renewed push for foreign aid reform. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who had been quietly working on a resolution for West African humanitarian support, as detailed in earlier accounts, found new allies among lawmakers moved by the viral moment. Though the resolution still faced steep opposition, a bipartisan group of younger representatives began advocating for a dedicated fund to support education in conflict zones, citing Traore's story as proof that individual voices could shift global perspectives. "He didn't just stand up to an insult," one senator remarked during a committee hearing. "He stood up for a generation. We can't ignore that." Karoline Leavitt, meanwhile, faced a reckoning of her own. After storming off the set,